Welcome to another quiet journey through time. You're listening to the Sleepy Historian, your companion in boring history for sleep, where the stories of long-forgotten places drift through the calm of night. If you find peace in these soft-spoken tales of the past, if this kind of bedtime relaxation and soft storytelling helps you rest, then feel free to like the video and subscribe, but only if it truly brings you calm. And let me know in the comments where you're listening from and what time it is. It's strangely comforting to know who else is out there, gently falling asleep to the same quiet stories of the old world. So, dim the lights. Let the waves whisper. Let the myths unfold. And let us begin. Tonight, we drift far beneath the surface of the sea, into the silence of the ancient deep. There, on the ocean floor, lie the forgotten ships of history, their timbers softened by centuries, their contents preserved like quiet time capsules. Some carried spices and wine, others statues, tools, or the belongings of merchants long vanished. And sometimes, archaeologists uncover things that seem strangely out of place, objects that hint at stories we can't quite explain. A marble head gazing from a sand, a seal jar that still holds air from 2,000 years ago, a bronze device whose gears defy its era. For the next 2 hours, we'll drift gently through the currents of ancient shipwrecks, exploring what they carried, what they reveal, and how they quietly reshape our understanding of history. This is not a tale of storm and disaster, but of stillness and discovery. We will not linger on destruction, but rather on what remains, the calm after centuries of sleep. In this slow voyage, we'll explore 4 moments, each revealing a different kind of secret resting beneath the sea. Daily life immersion. What did ordinary sailors and merchants bring aboard their ships? What traces of everyday life survive the deep? Biography or event? The story of one particular voyage, a ship, its crew, and its final journey into silence. Mystery, archaeology, and culture. The strange artifacts that confuse historians and the quiet science of uncovering them. Social and elite contrast. The treasures of emperors and the humble goods of commoners, both now resting side by side under layers of sand. Imagine yourself now, suspended in the dim blue quiet. The water presses gently around you. The sound of the surface fades away. Below, faint outlines of amphorae, anchors, and wooden beams form a soft mosaic of the past. Each fragment a whisper of a life once lived. Each silence a story waiting to be told. Take a deep breath. Settle into stillness. And together, let us drift into the relaxing history that helps you fall asleep. Through stories of Roman trade, ancient craftsmanship, and the mysteries of archaeology. This is boring history for sleep. A soft-spoken history documentary for dreamers, scholars, and lovers of calm narration. Let's begin our descent. Imagine yourself aboard an ancient merchant vessel, somewhere in the warm waters of the Mediterranean. The sun has only just risen, a pale disk shimmering over a sea of dull silver. The wood beneath your feet creaks softly, seasoned by salt and time. Around you, a dozen sailors move quietly, each one attending to their small part in the rhythm of the voyage, hauling a line, checking a jar of grain, brushing the deck with worn reeds. There's a rhythm to their days, one that changes little from week to week. At dawn, the smell of salted fish and barley porridge drift from a small clay pot balanced on glowing coals. They eat in silence, the sound of waves against the hull filling the spaces between their breaths. A straight gull glides above, waiting for scraps. The horizon stretches endlessly, the same low blue that has carried countless ships before and after this one. On this morning, you might hear the faint jangle of bronze fittings, or the murmur of 2 men discussing the wind. One speaks of home, of vineyards and olive trees. Another mends a rope with practiced hands, his fingers calloused, his eyes steady. These are the traces of ordinary life, the repetition, the routine, the slow pulse of survival at sea. Every movement, every sound, belongs to a quiet pattern older than memory. Below deck, the air grows thicker. The scent of tar, wood, and damp rope blends with that of dried figs and oil. Stacked amphorae sway gently with the motion of the ship. Some hold wine, others oil or grain. Each one is sealed with wax and stamped with the mark of its maker, the quiet pride of a distant artisan who will never know where his goods will rest. It is a kind of anonymous legacy scattered across the sea. If you look closely, you might notice small details of personal life among the cargo. A simple comb carved from bone, a bronze mirror, its surface clouded by age, a lamp still filled with hardened olive oil. The sailors might have carried amulets too, small charms for protection against the storms. Some are carved with the faces of gods, others with abstract symbols. Each one, a whisper of fear turned into faith. As the ship glides through calm water, you can feel the deep stillness of the sea beneath it. The oars, when used, dip slowly, rhythmically, barely breaking the surface. And when the wind catches the sail, the sound is almost like breathing, a long exhale, a soft sigh. The world narrows to the ship, the sea, and the sky. Days stretch into one another until time itself becomes fluid, like the waves around them. Night falls gently, bringing the cool hush of starlight. The sailors sleep close together on woven mats, wrapped in rough wool. The deck smells of salt and smoke. In the distance, lightning flickers far beyond the horizon, a reminder of the power that always waits unseen. Yet for now, all is calm. The water laps softly at the hull, steady as a heartbeat. In moments like this, it's easy to forget that each ship was a small world, complete in itself. A floating village carrying everything its crew needed: food, tools, faith, and stories. The journey was long, and comfort was scarce, but companionship made it bearable. They told tales under the stars, murmuring of lands they'd never seen. Egypt, Gaul, the misty edges of the known world. The sea was a vast road, and they were its quiet travelers. Many of these voyages ended safely, the ships returning to port with new cargo and stories to trade. But some, like the ones we explore tonight, never returned. A sudden storm, a broken mast, or the slow rod of wood meeting water, and the ship would sink into silence. Everything aboard would settle into darkness, sealed away for centuries. And now, when divers descend, they find not tragedy, but stillness, as if the sea itself preserved a single day, a frozen moment of daily life, held forever in quiet suspension. The clay cups, the cooking pots, the small carved trinkets, all waiting patiently, untouched. The sailors themselves are long gone, their names erased by time. But through their belongings, their quiet routines endure. You can almost sense the rhythm of their breath, the echo of laughter, the soft scrape of sandals on wood. As we move deeper into this journey, remember this feeling, the hum of ordinary existence carried across water. For in the world of ancient shipwrecks, it is not gold or treasure that speaks loudest, but these fragments of daily life. Simple, unremarkable, and yet profoundly human. They remind us that even in distant centuries, people lived in the same rhythm of hope, fear, and fatigue. And in that gentle repetition, the daily maintenance of survival, lies the real story of the ancient sea. The rhythm of life aboard the ancient ship was slow, deliberate, and steady, a rhythm shaped by wind, current, and necessity. Each morning began the same way, with quiet movements before dawn. The cook, often an older sailor, would crouch near a small brazier, coaxing the embers back to life. The faint crackle of burning olive would mix with the whisper of waves against the hull. Soon the first scent of food would drift through the air: salted fish, crushed barley, perhaps a handful of olives preserved in brine. The meal was simple, always the same, yet somehow comforting in its sameness. Imagine sitting near the edge of the deck, holding a clay bowl warm from the fire. The horizon is a pale line, and the sea reflects a thin blush of morning light. There is no hurry, no chatter, only the sound of eating, soft, unhurried, mindful, as if each bite were taken in communion with the slow pulse of the ocean. The ship rocks gently, The sail creaks and flutters as the wind shifts. Far off, dolphins surface and vanish, barely breaking the surface. The men glance up, faint smiles crossing their faces. Superstition whispers that dolphins bring luck, that they guide the ship away from storms. And so, even that fleeting sight becomes a small comfort. As the sun climbs higher, the air grows warm. The deck glows with reflected light, and the tar between the planks softens, giving off a faint, resinous scent. The sailors work slowly, tightening ropes, polishing bronze fittings, adjusting the cargo's weight. Every action is measured, never rushed. A sudden movement might upset balance or cause a rope to snap. So they move in harmony, each one aware of the others, each gesture a part of an unspoken choreography perfected over years at sea. Occasionally, a voice breaks the quiet, a tune hummed softly, or a story retold for the 100th time. Many of the men cannot read or write, but their memories are vast. They carry whole worlds of legend, told over and over beneath the same indifferent stars. The myths of Odysseus and the sea nymphs, of lost islands and hidden monsters, drift among them like shared dreams. They know that most of these tales are only stories, but when the horizon blurs and the sea grows endless, imagination becomes a necessary friend. At midday, the heat deepens. The sea turns bright blue, almost too bright to look at. The men seek shade under the sail or near the stacked amphory. Water is rationed carefully, a sip here, another at dusk. Some dip small cloths in seawater to cool their necks, though the salt leaves their skin dry and rough. The smell of sweat mingles with that of hemp and wood, creating a scent that belongs only to the life of sailors, clean and harsh, the scent of endurance. Far ahead, the faint outline of an island appears. It might be Cyprus or Rhodes or a nameless port where traders gather. The thought of solid ground stirs a quiet excitement. There, they might exchange goods, amphory of oil for blocks of copper, bolts of linen, or small carved idols. There, they might wash in fresh water, find bread still soft from the oven, and sleep on unmoving earth. But even in port, the rhythm does not truly break. The work continues, unloading cargo, haggling with merchants, caulking leaks, and preparing for the next journey. The markets are noisy, but the sailors move through them with calm indifference. They've seen dozens of ports before, each one different, yet somehow the same. Narrow streets paved with stone, the smell of fish and honey, the cries of vendors offering amphory, sandals, or wine. For the sailors, this is not novelty. It is life repeating itself, season after season. When evening falls, the light changes, softer, golden, and heavy. The ship drifts just offshore, the anchors dropped with a low, echoing splash. A few men swim in the shallows, their laughter barely rising above the sound of waves. On the deck, lamps are lit, small terracotta bowls of oil, their flames bending with the wind. The glow touches the wood with amber warmth, flickering over coiled ropes and tired faces. The meal at dusk is not so different from the mornings. Perhaps lentils, bread baked long ago and softened in water, a taste of wine mixed with sea air. Afterward, the men settle near the stern, their voices fading to murmurs. Someone begins to tell a story, one about a ship that never returned, a vessel swallowed by the deep. No one mocks or interrupts. They've all felt that quiet fear, the knowledge that the sea is both a path and a grave. But the way the story is told, soft, rhythmic, familiar, turns fear into calm acceptance. It becomes a kind of lullaby. Later, as the stars appear, the world grows vast again. The constellations stretch across the sky, marking routes known to ancient navigators. They steer not by instruments, but by memory, by the placement of stars and the taste of the wind. The sound of the water becomes softer now, almost hypnotic. The ship breathes with the sea, rising and falling in an endless cradle. As you listen, imagine the slow rocking beneath you, the dim glow of the lamps, the scent of oil and salt. Every sense is subdued, softened by repetition. In this rhythm, time begins to dissolve. And though these sailors lived more than 2,000 years ago, their quiet world feels close, a mirror of our own small routines, our need for order and uncertainty. In the deep hush of night, the sea and sky merge. The crew drifts into sleep, their minds wandering between memory and dream. The ship continues forward, alone but steady, carried by invisible hands. And beneath them, the ocean holds its secrets, patient and eternal. As days pass, the rhythm of the voyage becomes indistinguishable from the sea itself. Each dawn and dusk flow into one another, like ripples merging beneath an endless horizon. To live aboard such a ship is to surrender to repetition, to accept that each sound, each motion, is a variation of what came before. Even time feels different here. It stretches, softens, folds into itself, measured only by the changing color of light on the water. The sailors grow quiet with familiarity. They no longer need words for every task. The pulling of ropes, the folding of sailcloth, the shifting of amphory, all are done with silent precision. Only the gulls above seem to speak freely, calling out over the wake as if mocking human effort. The sailors do not mind. They've learned to find peace in the monotony, to see beauty in small things. A well-tied knot, the even line of a sail catching just the right wind. When storms threaten, they prepare without panic. The sky darkens slowly, not suddenly. The air grows heavier, as though the sea itself is holding its breath. They secure the cargo, tighten the ropes, and watch the horizon. Sometimes the storm passes without ever arriving, leaving behind a sky cleansed and pale. Sometimes the rain falls gently for hours, steady and musical, washing salt from the wood and cooling their sunburned faces. And sometimes the wind roars and the waves rise, but that too they accept. There is no fight against nature here, only endurance. Even in hardship, the tone of life aboard remains calm, measured, and resigned. At night, when the storm clouds clear, the air smells of wet wood and distant lightning. Lanterns swing gently, casting slow arcs of light across the deck. The men speak softly, grateful for calm waters once again. A few share dried fruit, others hum half-forgotten songs. No one counts the days anymore. They count the nights instead, marking them by the phases of the moon. The new moon brings unease, the sky too dark, the sea too vast, but the full moon feels like company, watching silently from above. Below deck, the cargo hums with life of its own. Wood contracts and expands, ropes strain, amphory shifts slightly in their nests of straw. The faint scent of wine mingles with that of salt, tar, and age. To those who live this life, these smells were constant companions, the scent of purpose and routine. It is strange to think that centuries later, these same scents can still be imagined, reconstructed from the very amphory, now resting on the seabed. Archaeologists who lift them from the deep often say that when the seal breaks, a faint aroma escapes, a breath from another world, from lives that once moved as quietly as this. Sometimes, between ports, the crew encounters drifting debris, a lost plank, a floating amphora, or a cluster of seaweed tangled around something unrecognizable. They watch it pass in silence. Each object tells a story they cannot hear, belonging perhaps to another ship, another journey, another set of lives swallowed by the sea. And though they never say it aloud, each man knows, someday, their own ship could join them. The thought is not fearful, only factual. The sea gives, and the sea keeps. The helmsman, older than the rest, keeps his eyes on the horizon even at rest. He has seen ships vanish into storms and reappear years later only as fragments of memory told by fishermen. He knows that each voyage is a fragile thread woven through time. When asked what keeps him calm, he shrugs and says, "The sea forgets quickly. We must do the same." His words carry no sadness, only truth. The final nights of a voyage are often the quietest. The men sense the nearness of land, though it may still lie days away. They begin to speak of home again, of wives, children, familiar hills, the smell of fresh bread. Yet beneath their voices is something softer, a reluctance, perhaps, to leave the sea's endless rhythm behind. For all its hardship, life aboard the ship has a purity to it. No walls, no possessions, only motion and sky. The world feels vast and uncluttered. When dawn comes, the air is cool and the sea glassy. Flying fish dart alongside the hull, and a faint mist clings to the water. The men move with quiet energy, tightening ropes and scanning for land. Somewhere, beyond the pale horizon, smoke from a port city will soon rise. But for now, there is only this, the last morning of the voyage, perfect in its ordinariness. They do not know that centuries later, the remains of their world will be found again, silent, preserved, waiting. The amphory will still be lined neatly. The cooking pots will still hold traces of grain. And small personal things, a brooch, a carved token, a cup marked with initials, will whisper of the hands that once held them. The archaeologists who find them will lower their voices, sensing the presence of lives once lived in this same quiet routine. And though the ship may have met its end in darkness, what remains will speak not of loss, but of continuity, of the eternal calm that follows all things forgotten by time. So as you drift deeper into stillness, imagine the sea closing softly over the wooden deck, sealing everything in silence. The light fades slowly, gently. The world above becomes distant, and what remains is not tragedy, but peace. The ship sleeps, the men rest, and the sea keeps their stories, murmuring them endlessly beneath the waves. Imagine now a different ship. It is larger than most merchant vessels of its time. A proud, sturdy construction of oak and pine, its hull bound with bronze nails that glint faintly in the sun. The year is somewhere around the 1st century before our era, perhaps a little earlier. The world is changing. Empires rise and fall. Trade routes shift like the tides. And yet, the sea remains constant. This ship would one day come to rest near a small, rocky island in the Aegean called Antikythera. But on the morning of its voyage, no one aboard would have imagined that fate. The air was warm and fragrant with salt. The harbor buzzed with the usual noise of trade. Shouts of merchants, the creak of ropes, the rhythmic thud of cargo being loaded. Amphorae filled with oil and wine were carried aboard in steady procession. Among them, heavy crates of bronze and marble, statues, perhaps, bound for Italy, destined to adorn villas and temples. And somewhere among the cargo lay something small, intricate, and extraordinary, a device of gears and dials that no one at the time fully understood. The men who crewed the vessel were experienced. Their hands were strong, their movements practiced. They had seen storms, endured months at sea, and learned to read the language of the waves. Most of them came from coastal towns, from Rhodes, Delos, perhaps even Egypt. Their dialects were different, their customs varied, but the life they shared aboard ship blurred those distinctions into simple cooperation. When the vessel finally pushed away from the quay, the sea shimmered like liquid glass. The wind filled the sail, slow at first, then with greater confidence. The wooden hull groaned softly, adjusting to motion. The men cheered quietly, not in celebration, but in acknowledgement of the journey's beginning. Each voyage was a leap into uncertainty, yet also a return to something familiar. The sea was their home, their trade, their quiet teacher. The ship's course ran westward, likely toward the Italian peninsula. Its cargo reflected the wealth of the eastern Mediterranean, the artistic heart of Greece feeding the appetites of Rome's growing elite. Bronze sculptures, marble torsos, ornate glassware, luxury goods crafted by skilled hands, now packed in straw and stacked deep below deck. Each piece represented both beauty and labor, faith and commerce intertwined. Above deck, life was as steady as the sea permitted. The sailors tended to ropes and sails, adjusted for wind, and occasionally lowered the anchor to rest in calmer waters. Meals were eaten in groups, stories told in fragments. They spoke of home, of their families, of ports where wine was cheaper, or storms more forgiving. The ship, though filled with treasures, was still a humble place. A world of wooden planks, smoke, salt, and sunlight. The captain, a man whose name time has long erased, would have stood near the stern, watching the horizon with the patience of someone who had crossed these waters 100 times. His face weathered, his eyes narrowed against the brightness. He likely knew the dangers of the Aegean's unpredictable winds. Yet he also knew the currents, the stars, the signs of shifting weather. To command a ship was not to control it, only to guide it gently, in partnership with the sea. Somewhere along the journey, perhaps a few days from port, the skies began to change. The breeze that once carried the ship westward grew restless. The water darkened, the swells deepened, and the sound of the wind took on a low, continuous hum. Still, no one panicked. Storms were part of the rhythm, as ordinary as hunger or sleep. They prepared as they always did, tightening ropes, lowering the sail, securing the cargo. For hours, the rain fell softly, not violently, a whisper of approaching power. The men worked in silence, trusting experience to carry them through. Somewhere below deck, water began to gather between the beams, trickling down like silver threads. The smell of the sea grew stronger, sharper, as though the ocean were breathing closer now. They pumped, they prayed, and they waited. No one could know what exactly happened next. Perhaps a sudden gust turned the sail too sharply. Perhaps the ship struck hidden rocks near Antikythera's shore. Or perhaps, burdened by its own weight, it simply began to yield to the sea. It would not have been dramatic, only slow, inevitable. The creak of timbers, the shift of cargo, the sound of water finding its way inward. The men would have called to one another, calm, measured voices amid the rising noise. Even as the ship began to tilt, even as darkness gathered, they would have acted with practiced order. When the final moment came, it was not a crash or a roar, but a quiet surrender. The ship descended into shadow, carrying with it everything: tools, amphorae, statues, the strange device of bronze gears that would one day astonish the modern world. Above, the surface closed gently, and the sound of the storm faded. For nearly 2,000 years, the ship lay undisturbed on the seabed. Its timbers softened, its cargo settled in layers of sand and coral. Fish made homes among the fallen statues, and the device, that silent marvel of human ingenuity, rested there, waiting for hands to rediscover it. The men were gone, their voices lost. But through their craft, through what they carried, their story endured in silence. What began as an ordinary voyage, one of countless journeys across the ancient sea, became, in time, one of history's quietest miracles. A sunken archive of human artistry and invention. A reminder that even in loss, there is preservation, and that the sea, though it takes, also keeps. For centuries, nothing disturbed the sea above the Antikythera wreck. Waves rolled endlessly, tracing the same forgotten coordinates as generations of sailors passed overhead unaware of what lay below. The water grew darker with depth, cool, still, eternal. There on the seabed, the once mighty ship rested like a memory turned to stone. The timbers softened, layer by layer, until only their outlines remained in the sand. Coral crept over bronze, slow and patient. Statues leaned where they had fallen, faces worn smooth by current and time. They no longer stood proud, no longer gleamed in sunlight. Yet in their silence, they became something else. Monuments not to the wealth of Rome, but to the endurance of creation itself. The sea had preserved them in a strange, beautiful sleep. Every passing century folded over the ship like a blanket of quiet. Earthquakes shook the region. Storms came and went, but deep below, the wreck remained undisturbed, as if time itself respected the stillness there. No light reached those depths. Only the faint vibration of distant thunder, the occasional sound of a passing whale, or the drifting shadow of a school of fish. Above, the world changed beyond recognition. Empires rose and fell. Languages evolved. maps were redrawn, and whole civilizations forgot the people who once built and sailed that vessel. The device that had rested among the cargo, a cluster of bronze gears and inscriptions, slept through it all. Salt and sand hid its brilliance, yet the design endured, small, intricate teeth locked together, waiting for motion. It was a machine meant to measure the heavens, a fragment of human curiosity lost beneath the sea. Then, one day, around the year 1900, the quiet was broken. A team of sponge divers from the island of Simi, sailing the familiar routes of their ancestors, dropped anchor near Antikythera to seek sponges. The sea was calm, pale, and deceptive, giving no hint of the secret it kept. One diver, Elias Stadiatus, descended with his heavy brass helmet and weighted suit. The water closed over him in slow, green folds. He descended deeper than usual, following the rope down, until the seabed appeared through a haze of silt. And there, among the rocks, he saw shapes that did not belong. Arms, torsos, the outlines of men, not living but cast in bronze. For a moment, he thought he had stumbled upon a graveyard of giants. He gestured wildly toward the surface, and when they pulled him up, his eyes were wide with something between terror and awe. He told them what he saw: a city beneath the water, a ship, statues, treasure. Curiosity overcame caution. More divers went down. They found pieces of marble, broken pottery, corroded bronze, and fragments of wood so ancient they crumbled at a touch. It took weeks to gather the first artifacts, the sea reluctant to release its hold. But eventually, the ship's contents began to rise toward daylight again, for the first time in nearly 2,000 years. Among the discoveries were exquisite statues, a bronze youth, a philosopher, horses, warriors, and gods, all heavy with marine growth but miraculously intact. Each object was carried carefully to the surface, lifted by ropes and pulleys. The divers worked slowly, often risking their lives in the dangerous depths. One of them never surfaced again. Even in discovery, the sea demanded its toll. Then came a smaller find, a cluster of corroded bronze fragments fused together by centuries of salt. It seemed insignificant at first compared to the grand statues. It looked like a lump of green stone, unrecognizable. The archaeologists stored it quietly, assuming it was part of some decorative object. Only later, years afterward, when it was cleaned and studied, did its true nature reveal itself. Inside that corroded shell was a mechanism, delicate, mathematical, astonishing. Dozens of tiny gears meshed together, inscribed with Greek letters, markings of the sun and moon. It was not decoration. It was calculation, a device capable of predicting celestial movements, eclipses, and planetary cycles. In essence, the world's first known analog computer. The Antikythera mechanism, as it came to be called, changed our understanding of ancient knowledge. It showed that the Greeks of the 1st century BCE possessed mechanical precision and astronomical insight long thought impossible for their era. It was in its way a bridge connecting ancient thought to modern science, hidden underwater for nearly 2 millennia. And yet, beyond its brilliance, there was something quietly human about it. Someone long ago had built it with careful hands. Someone had carried it aboard that ship, perhaps with pride, perhaps with purpose. It had once been turned by hand, the gears moving in harmony, showing the dance of planets and stars. Then it fell silent, not broken, only paused, waiting, patient, until the world was ready to listen again. Even now, the site remains sacred to silence. Divers still visit it, carefully, respectfully, not to conquer, but to observe. Every artifact they find carries a whisper of that lost voyage. The statues, the amphorae, the tools, the gears, each speaks in its own language of time, endurance, and the fragile persistence of human craft. The ship's story is not one of tragedy, but of continuity. It reminds us that even when knowledge is lost, it is not destroyed. It merely sleeps, beneath sand, beneath waves, beneath centuries, until light and curiosity awaken it once more. Far above the wreck, the Aegean glows the same way it did 2,000 years ago. The wind moves across its surface in ripples of silver. And somewhere below, still resting where it fell, lies the outline of that ancient ship, quiet, complete, eternal. Imagine, now, that you are standing on the deck of a modern research vessel. The surface of the Aegean is calm, glassy, reflective, a mirror between the sky and the sea. The air is warm and faintly salted, and somewhere below, in the dark, quiet world beneath the waves, the remains of that ancient ship still sleep. The engines hum softly, then fade into silence. A few meters away, divers prepare their equipment. They move slowly, speaking in low voices, as if not to disturb the unseen history below. Soon, one by one, they slip beneath the surface, their bubbles rising in steady rhythm, like the breath of time itself. When we think of archaeology, we often imagine ruins on land, crumbling temples, broken statues, the dust of forgotten streets. But beneath the sea lies another world entirely, a world where time behaves differently, where wood, rope, and even fabric can survive for centuries, untouched by air or flame. There is something strangely sacred about underwater ruins, the way they seem suspended between presence and absence, between past and now. The archaeologists who work there speak often of stillness. They describe the feeling of floating weightless through corridors of history, touching objects that have not felt human contact for thousands of years. A coin, a comb, a ceramic bowl, all preserved by chance and water. Each one tells a fragment of a life once ordinary, now extraordinary simply because it endured. It's easy to forget that the sea covers most of human history. Ports, villages, and trade routes that once flourished along the Mediterranean have long since sunk, not through sudden disaster, but through the slow, inevitable rising of tides and the quiet shifting of land. Every few decades, a storm reveals a piece of that buried world. A stone wall beneath the sand, a mosaic uncovered by waves, a fragment of pottery in shallows. And each discovery expands the boundary of what we know, reminding us how incomplete the map of the past truly is. Deep-sea archaeology is not fast work. It is a careful, meditative craft. Divers can spend hours in the water, moving only a few meters at a time. Visibility fades to darkness after a certain depth, and the smallest current can scatter silt into a soft, obscuring fog. Every brushstroke of sand reveals something fragile, and every artifact must be recorded precisely as it lies. There are no hurried gestures here, no sudden revelations, only patience, discipline, and the quiet companionship of the sea. In these conditions, strange discoveries occur. Amphorae are found perfectly stacked, as if waiting for a merchant's hand to lift them. Cooking pots still hold traces of grain or olive oil. Even simple tools, hammers, chisels, fishing hooks, remain arranged in place, as if time itself stopped mid-motion. There are shoes with soles intact, wooden writing tablets with faint letters still legible, and coins that bear the faces of emperors whose names have faded from memory. Sometimes, though, there are objects that make little sense. A Roman anchor discovered in what was once an ancient Greek trade zone. Fragments of Egyptian glass inside a Phoenician vessel. Or, in rare cases, artifacts centuries older than the ships that carried them. Such puzzles hint at the tangled web of trade and exchange that once connected the ancient world. A network stretching from Spain to India, from the Red Sea to the British Isles. Goods traveled farther than we imagine, carried not just by merchants, but by ambition, hope, and necessity. One of the quietest mysteries of ancient shipwrecks lies not in their cargo, but in their human traces. Among the amphorae and coins, archaeologists sometimes find personal items, a child's toy, a ring, a piece of carved bone, or a small cup engraved with a name. These are not treasures in the grand sense, but they are the most intimate. They speak of individuals rather than empires. They remind us that every shipwreck, no matter how distant, was once filled with people. Men and women with routines, dreams, and habits not so different from ours. When the divers lift such an item from the seabed, they often pause before passing it to the surface. It's not merely an object, it's a voice from another time. It carries the warmth of human touch across centuries. A ring might have been worn daily, its metal polished by skin and salt. A small oil lamp may have flickered in a cramped cabin during a stormy night. And now, it rests quietly in the gloved hands of someone trying to understand. Back on the ship, the archaeologists clean each artifact with the gentlest care. There is no rush, only a deliberate rhythm, soft brushes, distilled water, a logbook waiting to be filled. Every label, every measurement, every line of notes becomes part of the story. The act of documentation itself is almost meditative, a slow stitching of the present to the past. At night, when the day's dives are done, the deck falls silent again. The researchers sit under dim lights, listening to the water lap softly against the hull. Some write, some simply stare out at the darkness, where the stars above mirror the bioluminescent specks below. It's a humbling sight, the reminder that all discoveries, no matter how profound, exist within a vastness that still keeps most of its secrets. The ocean, after all, is a quiet archivist. It remembers what we forget, and it keeps what we lose. Each wreck, each fragment, each whisper of the past that sleeps below the waves. They're all chapters of a book still being written. To study them is to listen closely, patiently, to pages turned by water and time. And as you listen now, perhaps half awake, imagine those slow, patient movements beneath the sea. Hands brushing away silt, cameras flashing gently, divers floating between the present and the ancient world. History, in this form, is not loud or triumphant. It is gentle. It breathes in currents. It waits for us to notice. There is something quietly magnetic about the unknown. It draws the human mind not with urgency, but with gentle persistence, like a faint light shimmering far below the surface, inviting curiosity without demanding it. Beneath the sea, this magnetism becomes even stronger. For the ocean holds not only what we have lost, but what we never fully understood. Among the thousands of shipwrecks discovered across the Mediterranean, a few stand apart. Not because of treasure or grandeur, but because of the mysteries they contain. Artifacts that seem to resist classification. Objects made with methods no longer practiced, or crafted from materials foreign to the region where they were found. Each one invites questions, and yet each answer seems to drift just out of reach, like a shadow moving in the tide. One such example lies off the coast of Israel, near Caesarea. There, archaeologists uncovered a Roman shipwreck carrying an assortment of cargo: bronze lamps, glass vessels, iron anchors, all expected, all typical. But among them was something strange. A group of bronze medical instruments, precisely made, some still within their small wooden case. Their condition was remarkable, as though the physician who owned them had only just stepped away. Scalpels, forceps, probes, even a tiny bronze syringe. The sea had preserved them in a way time could not. They revealed not only the reach of Roman trade, but the sophistication of Roman medicine, and how a healer once traveled with his tools across uncertain waters. Another wreck, near the island of Kyrenia in Cyprus, told a quieter story. It dated to the 4th century BCE, one of the oldest surviving Greek merchant ships ever found. Its cargo was simple: amphorae of wine, almonds, olive oil, and figs. But within that simplicity was a glimpse of the ancient Mediterranean economy in motion. On the seabed, the amphorae were still stacked in neat rows, just as they had been loaded 2,000 years earlier. Between them lay fragments of the crew's meals: olive pits, fish bones, even crumbs of barley bread, preserved in sediment. A small wooden cup, carved roughly by hand, still sat beside a clay oil lamp. It seemed as if someone had just set it down, expecting to return. Yet not all discoveries were so easily understood. Near the island of Madia in Tunisia, divers exploring another Roman wreck unearthed sculptures, marble columns, and bronze artifacts destined for Italy, perhaps the spoils of war or a wealthy collector's shipment. But interspersed with these were objects of uncertain purpose. Bronze discs engraved with geometric markings, tools with no known counterparts, and fragments of machinery whose uses remain debated. Some suggest they were instruments of measurement, perhaps nautical, perhaps astronomical. Others believe they may have been part of a philosophical experiment, a merging of art, mathematics, and engineering. Whatever they were, they remind us how much of ancient ingenuity remains hidden beneath both water and misunderstanding. Even in the 21st century, new technologies continue to reveal what was once invisible. High-resolution sonar maps the seabed in minute detail, exposing patterns no diver could see. Underwater, drones glide through narrow spaces once unreachable by humans, capturing images of objects undisturbed since antiquity. And yet, even with these advances, the tone of exploration remains humble, for every revelation seems to raise more questions than it answers. Perhaps the most intriguing finds are those that seem to echo across time. Inventions or concepts we associate with modernity, appearing in places we least expect. Bronze gears, complex pulleys, lenses cut with precision, ship fittings designed with hydrodynamic efficiency long before such terms existed. Each discovery reminds us that progress is not a straight line, but a rhythm, an ebb and flow of understanding. Knowledge, like the sea itself, advances and retreats. In some wrecks, archaeologists have found strange lumps of metal that, when analyzed, contain alloys of unexpected composition, mixtures suggesting experimentation, perhaps early attempts at materials we thought were modern. There are reports of glass that refracts light unusually well, of pigments made with rare minerals, of navigational tools that resemble prototypes of later compasses. None of these imply anachronism or myth, only that humanity has always reached further than its own certainty. Innovation is older than memory, and then there are the cargoes that seem almost symbolic. In one Byzantine wreck near the Turkish coast, divers uncovered hundreds of amphorae, but every one of them empty. No wine, no oil, no resin, no cargo. It is possible that the ship had been cleaned before its final voyage, or perhaps it sailed as a transport returning home. Still, the image endures. A vessel carrying only silence, rows upon rows of hollow containers, waiting to be filled. It is in its way a perfect metaphor for how the past arrives to us. Vessels intact, meaning absent, waiting for interpretation. These quiet enigmas are part of what makes underwater archaeology so compelling. It is not merely about discovery, but about listening to what the sea has chosen to preserve, listening to what time has left unsaid. The deep does not yield its secrets easily. It invites patience, reflection, and humility. For every artifact that rises to the surface, thousands more remain below, untouched, unstudied, unseen. Together, they form a silent library of human effort, invention, and loss. Imagine that vast library now, rows upon rows of ships resting on the ocean floor, their timbers collapsed, their cargoes scattered yet undisturbed. Some are Roman, some Greek, some Phoenician, some lost to all names. Each one carries a single line in the story of civilization. Each one waits for someone, someday, to listen again. The mysteries of these shipwrecks do not demand resolution. They offer something gentler, the comfort of wonder. A reminder that history is not a solved puzzle, but a horizon we keep sailing toward, slowly, quietly, endlessly. When we look at the ancient artifacts drawn from the sea, we are not simply seeing objects. We are looking at echoes of intent, the quiet continuation of human purpose long after the hands that shaped it have turned to dust. Each fragment recovered from the seabed is both evidence and metaphor. Evidence of a specific moment in history, and metaphor for the persistence of human curiosity, how we continue to reach through time, searching for ourselves and what we once made. In museums across the world, Many of these discoveries now rest behind glass. They are cleaned, labeled, and softly lit, yet still carry the subtle textures of the ocean. If you lean close, you can almost imagine the sound of waves still clinging to them, a faint memory of the deep. Visitors pass by slowly, speaking in whispers, as if the artifacts themselves deserve silence. And perhaps they do. They have already spent 2,000 years in quiet. It would be almost cruel to subject them to noise now. Some exhibits recreate the shipwrecks exactly as they were found. Amphorae arranged in the same pattern, fragments placed with gentle precision, notes of discovery projected in low light. These displays are not meant to dazzle. They are meant to soothe, to remind us that history is made of patience. The archaeologist's brush replaces the warrior's sword. The diver's steady breathing replaces the roar of conquest. In this new rhythm, the sea becomes an archivist and the scholar becomes a listener. It is strange how much of our world has been shaped by what we have lost. The Antikythera mechanism, the Carenia ship, the Madia cargo, each was once a tragedy, a disaster, a story of failure at sea. Yet today, they are celebrated as windows into our collective past. The very moments that ended in silence have become the stories that speak most clearly. Loss, it seems, is also a form of preservation. And perhaps that is the deeper mystery, not the strange objects or the forgotten devices, but the way the sea transforms what it takes. A storm destroys a ship, but the sea rebuilds it into something new. A coral-covered monument, a home for fish, a secret archive of civilization. Every plank, every coin, every piece of cargo slowly becomes part of the ocean's memory. Centuries later, when divers arrive with lights and cameras, they are not disturbing the past. They are meeting it halfway. Imagine for a moment that you are one of those divers. You descend slowly, the light above fading into muted turquoise. Your breathing is steady. Each exhale rises like a trail of silver pearls toward the surface. Below you, the outlines of the ship emerge, not sharp but softened by time. It is not ruinous nor frightening. It is calm. You move closer, brushing away the thin veil of sand that conceals an amphora. Inside, you find nothing, and yet that emptiness feels full of all that it once carried, all that it once meant. The deeper you go, the quieter the world becomes. No sound of wind, no chatter, only the hum of your own existence. And in that quiet, something profound begins to surface, an awareness that time does not simply pass. It collects. It gathers in layers, just as the silt does, covering and preserving in equal measure. To study a shipwreck is to read those layers, gently peeling back each one, knowing that beneath them lies not just data, but emotion, the touch of lives once lived. Even the smallest finds have immense weight. A stylus for writing on wax tablets tells us that even sailors kept records. A gaming piece carved from bone shows that leisure, too, traveled across the seas. Fragments of textiles reveal not only trade, but taste, the colors and patterns that once appealed to someone, somewhere. Each detail transforms an anonymous wreck into a human story, and that, perhaps, is the quiet reward of underwater archaeology, the rediscovery of ordinary lives. In this sense, shipwrecks are not just accidents. They are intersections, points where human ambition meets nature's enduring patience. The sea, though vast and impartial, becomes the ultimate curator. It keeps what we lose and returns it when the time is right. The mysteries may never be solved completely. The Antikythera mechanism still holds inscriptions we cannot read. Some cargoes remain unidentified, some origins uncertain. But maybe that uncertainty is part of what makes them so soothing to contemplate. Mystery gives us room to breathe. It allows the mind to drift, to wonder gently rather than demand answers. It is, in its own way, a lullaby written in salt and stone. When you listen to the stories of these shipwrecks, you are not hearing about failure or tragedy. You are hearing about continuity. The continuity of creation, of effort, of curiosity. You are hearing how humanity, even in its most fragile form, leaves traces strong enough to survive oceans. And as those traces resurface, cleaned and studied by hands centuries later, the connection between past and present becomes beautifully simple, one long, unbroken breath. So, as you settle deeper into your own calm, imagine the gentle drift of silt across the floor of the ancient Mediterranean. Imagine the artifacts resting quietly, the slow rhythm of the water above them. And imagine, too, that somewhere beyond sight, another diver begins to descend, carrying with them the same curiosity, the same care, the same human desire to know. In this way, discovery never truly ends. It only continues, softly, patiently, like the sea itself. When we think of ancient shipwrecks, it is easy to picture them as silent museums of treasure, amphorae filled with gold, marble statues, and jewels resting on the seabed. But most ships that went down carried no such riches. They were vessels of necessity, not of luxury. Their cargoes were made of things meant for living: food, tools, oil, grain, and the unglamorous essentials of trade. Yet these simple things, preserved by the sea, now speak as clearly as any jewel-encrusted relic. Imagine the hold of a Roman merchant ship, stacked amphorae filled with olive oil and garum sauce, the strong-smelling fish paste beloved by Roman kitchens, bundles of wool, jars of dates, and small sacks of grain. There are sandals, ropes, tools, wooden bowls, and bits of pottery, all ordinary, all quietly beautiful in their simplicity. Nothing here was meant for emperors. It was meant for people like us, workers, travelers, sailors, merchants. Their lives unfolded not in palaces, but in the steady rhythm of the waves. In contrast, some ships did carry items of splendor. They bore gifts for rulers, statues for temples, luxury glassware, and fine fabrics meant for the upper classes. One shipwreck might contain thousands of amphorae of plain oil. Another might reveal the carved bust of a god or a philosopher. Yet when both are found centuries later, the sea has made them equal. The clay jar and the marble head are softened by the same touch of salt and time. Status fades in water. What remains is simply form, the evidence of human care in creation. Among the most fascinating examples of this contrast is the Mahdia shipwreck, found off the coast of Tunisia. It carried a cargo of magnificent Greek art, bronze statues, marble sculptures, and intricate furniture fittings, likely bound for a Roman villa. Every piece was a masterpiece, crafted by skilled artisans who worked in workshops that once lined the Aegean coast. These were the possessions of the elite, expressions of taste, wealth, and education. And yet, as they lay beneath the sea for 2 millennia, they became something more universal. The sea erased ownership. What belonged to one household now belongs to the world's collective memory. Meanwhile, another ship nearby, never written about, never named, may have carried nothing more than grain or tools. It sank unnoticed, its crew forgotten, its purpose unrecorded. And yet, the fragments recovered from its hull, a cooking pot, a small lamp, a child's shoe, now speak louder than the statues of the wealthy. For in those humble remains, we see not just history, but humanity. We see the texture of ordinary life, the rhythm of work, the quiet persistence of those who built empires without ever wearing crowns. It's a strange kind of equality, this democracy of the deep. In life, people were divided by wealth and rank. In death, beneath the ocean, they rest side by side, marble beside pottery, silver beside clay. The water does not care who they were. It preserves them with the same patience. Archaeologists studying these sites often remark that the most emotional discoveries are not the grand treasures, but the personal ones. A wooden comb, still holding the ghostly outline of its teeth. A fragment of textile, woven by an unknown hand. A small bronze bell, perhaps once tied to a pack animal. Each of these carries a whisper of individuality, proof that history is made not only by kings and scholars, but by the countless unnamed people who lived and labored in their shadow. As we reflect on this, the contrast between rich and poor becomes strangely soothing, because in the stillness of the seabed, those divisions no longer matter. The artifacts of the powerful and the humble rest in the same slow light. Both are covered in coral, both are softened by sand, both are rediscovered with the same reverence. It reminds us that time is the great equalizer, patient, impartial, endlessly kind. And yet, even in equality, their differences tell us something profound. The cargoes of luxury ships show what civilizations valued in art, belief, and beauty. The cargoes of ordinary vessels show what they valued in survival. The trade networks that fed cities, the routes that kept life itself flowing across the ancient world. Together, they form a complete picture, the spiritual and the practical, the imagined and the lived, each incomplete without the other. To study both is to understand civilization not as a pyramid of power, but as a tapestry, threads of wealth and work intertwined. The silk of the elite is meaningless without the wool of the shepherd. The philosopher's statue meaningless without the labor who unloaded it from the dock. And in that realization lies a kind of peace. Because beneath all the noise of history, the truth is simple. Everyone leaves traces, and every trace matters. Picture again the underwater landscape, scattered amphory, gleaming marble, and the soft drift of silt. There is no hierarchy here, only stillness, only the quiet hum of eternity passing through what once was human. As you rest in this vision, imagine both worlds, the grand and the humble, suspended together in a single scene. A marble statue half buried beside a clay bowl. A gold coin resting near a wooden tool. Different purposes, different origins, yet now united in the calm silence of time. This is the message the shipwrecks give to us, that in the end, all stories meet. The sea, with infinite patience, carries them all. And if you listen closely beneath the sound of the waves, you might hear not just history, but harmony. The gentle blending of every life, every class, every ambition into one shared stillness, the deep song of time itself. The deeper we drift into the story of these wrecks, the clearer it becomes that every artifact, no matter how grand or modest, carries the same quiet dignity. The sea has a way of erasing context, washing away titles, boundaries, and hierarchies, until all that is left is form, texture, and memory. A delicate glass cup once held in the hands of a noble woman lies beside a sailor's coarse jug. Both are cracked, clouded, softened by time. And somehow, in that shared decay, both become beautiful. Imagine a diver's lamp gliding through the gloom, revealing shelves of cargo turned to coral. There, a polished bronze bowl, its surface greened by centuries of rest. Beside it, a rough clay pot, thick and uneven. The two glint together in the soft beam of light. You cannot tell which once belonged to wealth, which to work. The sea does not care, and perhaps that indifference is its gentlest truth. The contrast between luxury and labor is not just visible in objects, but in what they represent. A silver mirror speaks of leisure, of time spent grooming, of social rituals, of self-regard. A chipped wooden ladle, found nearby, speaks of sustenance, of cooking, of hunger, of care. Both, in their way, reflect the same human impulse, to make life a little more bearable, a little more beautiful. It is this quiet thread of common purpose that binds all classes across the centuries. When archaeologists study shipwrecks, they often focus on cataloging items by material and origin. But to the quiet observer, the kind who lingers, these fragments tell softer stories. A child's small bronze bracelet found near the Antikythera wreck hints at travel, at family, at someone cherished and protected. A carved ivory handle from another site tells of craftsmanship, patience, and pride and skill. Even broken, even buried, these objects breathe the memory of hands that once touched them. And then there are the things made not for use, but for meaning. Figurines of household gods. Carved charms meant to keep sailors safe. Coins left as offerings to the sea. tiny gestures of hope cast into the unknown. Each of these speaks to something deeply human, the need to believe that care or prayer could soften fate. Some of these artifacts belong to merchants or captains. Others came from the poorest crewmen. But belief, like the sea, was shared by all. We can almost picture them in their last moments. Not the fear of sinking, but the quiet realization that all their distinctions were vanishing. In the rush of water and weight, the world of ranks and roles dissolved into the same cold stillness. And then, the ship became a memory, a capsule of human contrast sealed beneath the waves. Centuries later, when the divers return, they do not find empires. They find evidence of people, of lives that once intertwined across social lines, drawn together by trade, by necessity, by the endless tide of survival. Some handled scrolls and seals, others ropes and rudders, but all depended on one another. In this way, the shipwreck becomes a portrait of society itself. Everyone aboard essential, no matter their station. This truth becomes most poignant in the Antikythera wreck, where among the statues of gods and the famed mechanical device were found small utensils, lamps, and sandals. Magnificence and simplicity side by side. The presence of both reminds us that no civilization is built purely on genius or grandeur. It is built on the unspoken harmony between creators and carriers, thinkers and laborers, artists and sailors, all contributing quietly to the same shared voyage. The sea, in its patience, has become the great conservator of that harmony. Its currents move gently through centuries, shifting sand to reveal a coin here, a fragment of sculpture there. Each revelation reminds us that the story of history is not about the few who ruled, but the many who endured. For every emperor whose name is carved in marble, there are countless others whose hands built the world, unrecorded but indispensable. And when the camera lights or a diver's torch glows across the seabed, what appears in the silence is not loss, but connection. The shimmering of metal beside clay, the faint shape of sandal print hardened in silt, all whisper of the same truth. That every object, every person, was part of the same great experiment called civilization. Even the most luxurious items, golden jewelry, intricate mosaics, fine glass, lose their arrogance here. Underwater, gold does not shine. Marble dulls, glass clouds. Their splendor is subdued, their voices hushed. And in that hush, the simplest things, a cup, a comb, a nail, regain their place. They're the quiet counterweights to glory, the anchors of human life. If you close your eyes, you can almost hear the faint echo of that balance. The mingling of the elite and the ordinary, drifting together through centuries. It feels natural, peaceful, as if the sea itself were teaching us humility. In its deep, steady rhythm, all differences are softened, all lives are remembered equally. And perhaps that is the calmest truth of all, that time and water have done what human society rarely could. They have made everything equal. Every fragment, every life, every story now belongs not to kings or sailors, but to history itself. Vast, impartial, endlessly kind. As we drift toward the end of this long, quiet voyage, imagine yourself once again beneath the water, floating slowly above the outline of a forgotten ship. The timbers have long dissolved, leaving behind the ghostly impression of form, a shape remembered only by the placement of its cargo. There is no sound except the slow heartbeat of the sea. Light filters through the surface in delicate ribbons, tracing across objects that once moved through busy markets and crowded ports. Here, far from human noise, they rest together, rich and poor, sacred and mundane, all equal in stillness. It is a kind of harmony that humanity often forgets above the waves. For centuries, people built walls between themselves, walls of wealth, education, language, and birth. But under the sea, those walls crumble. A jeweled earring lies beside a cracked clay jug. A bronze statue rests among planks of rough timber. The remnants of rulers mingle with the relics of sailors, indistinguishable now in the soft quiet of time. Each shipwreck, in its way, becomes a gentle teacher. It whispers that no one, no matter how powerful, escapes the slow leveling of the centuries. The sea does not erase, it equalizes. It keeps everything, but keeps it gently, folding each story into the next. In that deep patience, there is comfort, because if all things eventually merge, then nothing is ever truly lost. Consider the many artifacts that have surfaced in recent decades. The fine glassware from the Alubaran wreck, delicate as frost, once traded between kings. The plain pottery from nearby merchant ships, coarse and sturdy. Placed together in museum displays, their beauty is shared, their stories now told in one breath. Visitors move quietly through the dim light, their reflections mingling on the glass cases, their footsteps soft as though afraid to disturb the serenity of time. For many, it is their first glimpse of a world where art and labor were not opposites, but companions. The longer you gaze at these displays, the amphory lined like ancient constellations, the faint traces of textiles preserved by salt, the more you begin to feel that the past is not distant. It hums quietly under our own world, like a low tide that never fully retreats. These objects, once tools and treasures, now serve a gentler purpose, to remind us that human experience, in all its complexity, has always been shared. Across time, across class, across oceans, the rhythm of existence remains much the same. There's a special calm in that realization. It suggests that the divisions we hold so tightly are illusions, temporary, like ripples that fade when the sea is still again. In the darkness of the deep, what survives is not wealth or title, but craftsmanship, care, and intention. A pot carefully shaped, a handle carved with grace, a statue balanced in perfect form. These things were made by hands, not royal, not divine, just human. And through them, the Maker speaks softly across thousands of years, saying, "We were here. We worked. We hoped." Imagine walking through one of those silent underwater excavations. You move slowly, guided by the light of your lamp, stirring fine sediment with each step. Before you, fragments emerge, a piece of bronze, a tile, a handle of carved bone. Each one feels familiar, almost personal. You might not know who held it, but you can sense their presence. And for a moment, time folds neatly around you. The distance between past and present fades, and you feel connected, not through power or story, but through the simple act of living. This is what makes these wrecks more than archaeological sites. They are mirrors, showing us how fragile civilization is, and yet how enduring its essence can be. Empires fall, monuments crumble, but the quiet details, the bowl, the shoe, the comb, remain. They carry forward a truth more enduring than conquest, that humanity, in its simplest moments, is beautiful. Even now, when we study or display these artifacts, there's a kind of reverence that borders on ritual. Curators arrange them carefully, lights dimmed, air still. Visitors lean closer, not to see wealth, but to feel connection. And that feeling, that recognition, is what the sea has preserved most of all. Not just the things people made, but the quiet meaning they gave to them. In a sense, the story of shipwrecks is the story of balance, between ambition and humility, between creation and decay, between the desire to endure and the inevitability of being forgotten. The sea, vast and calm, holds all of these contradictions without judgment. It teaches through silence. It shows us that equality is not a matter of power, but of time. And perhaps, as you listen now, the same realization drifts through your mind, that all we build, all we treasure, will one day rest in stillness too. But in that stillness, there is no tragedy. There is peace, a peace earned by the simple continuity of existence, by the quiet truth that every life, every hand, leaves something behind, however small. So as the waves above roll gently, and the seabed lies undisturbed, the story continues. The statues still stand, the pots still rest, the coins still glimmer, faintly under the shifting light. They have no audience, no purpose, and yet they persist. And in their persistence, they offer a soft reminder that even the most fleeting lives contribute to the endless rhythm of history, the slow heartbeat of time beneath the sea. And so, as we rise slowly from the depths of time, the waters grow lighter, warmer. The shipwrecks fade beneath us, their shapes softening into the deep blue silence. Above, the faint shimmer of the surface draws closer, sunlight breaking into ripples, air waiting just beyond. The story of these ancient ships ends not in tragedy, but in stillness. They did not vanish. They simply changed form, becoming part of something larger, something eternal. Each plank, each jar, each small human trace folded into the rhythm of the sea, where all stories meet and merge. It is strange to think that what began as work, as trade, as the noise of life, became, in the end, a sanctuary of calm. A reminder that time itself is patient, and that even loss can become beauty if you give it long enough to rest. Perhaps that is why we are drawn to these quiet histories, not for their treasure, but for their peace. When we listen to the stories of ancient sailors and forgotten merchants, we hear the same hopes and worries that still echo in our modern hearts. The sea, the stars, the endless passage of time, they remain constant. We are only passing through, as they once did, leaving behind small fragments of ourselves for others to find. Now, as you lie back and let your breathing match the rhythm of the waves, you might picture those relics once more. The jars resting in sand, the statues standing in stillness, the soft current moving gently over everything that once was. They're not gone. They're only quiet. And in that quiet, there is something profoundly human, something that feels like rest. If this journey through boring history for sleep has helped you drift toward peace, feel free to like this video and subscribe, but only if it truly brings you calm. And if you're still awake, you can share in the comments where you're listening from and what time it is. There's something quietly comforting about knowing that across the world, others are listening too, letting the same old stories carry them into dreams. You are part of that stillness now, part of the slow, continuous tide that connects every listener, every century, every life. So close your eyes. Let the ancient sea recede into silence. Let the echoes of the past settle softly around you, like silt returning to rest. And as the last ripple fades, may you find yourself drifting gently, deeply into sleep. Good night, traveler. From the Sleepy Historian. Thank you for journeying through calm bedtime storytelling, through this quiet world of relaxing history to fall asleep to, of soft-spoken history documentaries, of ancient archaeology and soothing narration. Until next time, may your dreams be gentle and your rest as deep as the sea.